The school bell rang sharply, echoing through the crowded hallways as hundreds of students spilled out of classrooms. Among them was a girl few people noticed, Elena. It was her first week at Riverside High, and already the whispers followed her like a shadow. She was the new girl, quiet, reserved, and different. Her family had moved to town after her father's job transfer, and starting over had never been easy. She kept her head down, carrying her books tightly against her chest, hoping to pass unnoticed. But predators always sensed weakness. 3 boys known around school for their cruelty had been watching Alina since the first day. They had mocked her accent, laughed at her thrift store clothes, and today they decided to go further. As Alina walked past the lockers toward the exit, the tallest of the boys suddenly stepped in front of her, blocking the path. Well, he sneered. New girl thinks she's too good to talk to us. Before Elena could answer, another boy grabbed her arm, and the third, smirking cruelly, lunged forward and groped her chest. For a moment the world seemed to freeze. Gasps erupted from nearby students, but no one dared intervene. Elena's heart pounded in her ears, not from fear, but from rage. What no one knew was that Alina had spent years training in martial arts. Her father, a former military officer, had taught her self-defense not as a sport, but as a necessity in a world that wasn't always kind to women. She had promised herself she would never let anyone humiliate or control her. And now her vow was being tested. The boy's laughter had barely finished when Alina's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with precision. With a swift twist, she forced his arm backward until he cried out in pain. The other 2 lunged forward, but Alina moved like water, her training guiding her every move. She ducked under one boy's swing, driving her elbow into his stomach, sending him sprawling against the lockers. The last tried to grab her hair, but she stepped aside, swept his legs with a powerful kick, and he crashed to the floor groaning. The hallway erupted in shock. Phones were out, recording every second. The same students who once ignored her now stared wide-eyed at the quiet girl who had just taken down 3 bullies in less than 30 seconds. Elena stood firm, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, eyes burning with an intensity no one had seen before. A teacher rushed in at the commotion, demanding answers. The bullies, now humiliated, tried to twist the story, but dozens of students spoke up in Alina's defense. The truth had been witnessed by everyone, and there was no escaping it. The boys were dragged to the principal's office, faces pale with shame. But for Alina, the real battle wasn't the fight itself. It was what came after. That evening she sat quietly in her room, replaying the moment in her mind. The anger, the stares, the relief of knowing she could defend herself. All of it weighed heavily. She wasn't proud of the violence, but she knew she had done what she needed to do. For girls like her, silence was not an option. Standing up was survival. The next day, something unexpected happened. Students who had once ignored her came to sit beside her at lunch. A shy freshman whispered, "Thank you for showing us we don't have to be scared." Others nodded, sharing their own stories of being cornered, mocked, or touched without consent. For the first time, Elena realized her fight wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been silenced by fear. The bullies were suspended, their reputations shattered, but Elena's strength echoed far beyond that hallway. She had shown everyone that courage didn't always come from loud voices or popularity. It came from standing firm when no one else dared to. Weeks later, when another girl was harassed in the cafeteria, she stood up too, not with fists, but with a voice that refused to be quiet. One act of courage had lit a fire in others, and soon the school was no longer ruled by fear, but by solidarity. Elena never sought to be a hero, but she became one anyway. She had walked into Riverside High as the invisible new girl, but she left her mark as something far greater, a symbol of resilience. And her story carried one powerful message. When you stand up for yourself, you give others the strength to do the same. The halls of Riverside High were always buzzing with chatter, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, lockers slamming, and laughter bouncing off the walls. But for Alina, the noise felt distant, like she was walking through a tunnel. It was only her 3rd day at the school, and already she had learned that being new meant being invisible, or worse, a target. She kept her eyes on the ground as she walked, her long brown hair falling forward like a curtain. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Stay strong, mi niña. Not everyone deserves to see your heart, but never let them see your fear." Elena clutched her books tighter, reminding herself of the promise she had made. to start fresh, to keep her head down, and to focus on her studies. But fate had other plans. 3 boys leaned against the lockers ahead of her, laughing too loudly, their eyes tracking her like predators watching prey. Everyone in school knew their names: Derek, the tall ringleader with cruel eyes; Ryan, his eager sidekick who laughed at everything; and Caleb, who always followed more out of fear of Derek than loyalty. "Hey, new girl," Derek called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Why don't you smile? Don't you know that's what you're here for?" Alina stiffened but kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard. Ryan chuckled, nudging Derek. "Maybe she doesn't speak English," Caleb added. "Or maybe she thinks she's too good for us." Their laughter rang out, drawing the attention of students nearby. Some looked away quickly, others lingered, curious to see what would happen next. Elena's steps quickened, but before she could pass, Derek blocked her path. His shadow loomed over her as he leaned closer. "Come on, don't be shy." Ryan moved in from the side, gripping Elena's arm, and in an instant Derek's hand shot out, grabbing her chest. Time froze. A sharp gasp echoed from the crowd. Elena's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Humiliation seared through her, but underneath it burned something stronger, something fiercer: rage. The laughter that followed was the final spark. With lightning speed, Elena's hand clamped around Derek's wrist. Before he could process what was happening, she twisted sharply. The sickening pop of tendons made him yelp, his laughter replaced with a scream. Ryan lunged to pull her back, but Elena pivoted, driving her elbow hard into his ribs. He collapsed against the lockers, air rushing from his lungs in a groan. Caleb, panicked, tried to grab her hair, but Elena stepped aside and swept her leg in a clean arc, sending him crashing to the ground. In seconds, the hallway was silent except for the groans of 3 bullies writhing on the floor. Elena stood tall, chest heaving, her face calm but her eyes blazing with fire. Dozens of students stared, phones raised, recording the entire scene. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't invisible. A teacher burst onto the scene. "What on earth is going on here?" she demanded. Her eyes landed on the bullies first, then flicked to Elena. "They," Derek stammered, clutching his wrist. "She attacked us." But voices rose from the crowd immediately. "No, that's not true," shouted a girl from the back. "They touched her first. She was defending herself," another student added. The teacher's stern gaze shifted to Elena. "Is that true?" Elena swallowed hard, her voice trembling but steady. "Yes, I wasn't going to let them hurt me." The teacher nodded slowly, then gestured for all of them to follow her to the principal's office. As they walked, whispers buzzed through the hallway. Elena kept her chin high, though her hands still trembled from the adrenaline. Inside the office, the bullies tried desperately to twist the story, but the videos spreading across social media told the truth. By the end of the day, Derek, Ryan, and Caleb were suspended for harassment, their reputations shattered. But Elena's battles weren't over. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at her ceiling, the events replaying like a movie she couldn't pause. She had stood up for herself, but the stares, the whispers, the rush of anger, it all weighed heavily. She wondered if tomorrow would bring respect, or if she would now wear a different kind of target on her back. The next morning, she walked into school bracing for isolation. Instead, something unexpected happened. Students nodded at her in quiet respect. A freshman girl approached shyly at lunch. I saw what you did," she whispered. "Thank you for showing us that we don't always have to take it." Elena's eyes softened. "You never have to take it," she replied gently. One by one, others began to share their stories of being mocked, cornered, touched without consent. And slowly, the invisible wall around Elena crumbled. She wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was a symbol of strength. Weeks later, another incident unfolded in the cafeteria. Different bullies, different target. But this time, it wasn't Elena who stood up first. It was the same freshman girl, her voice shaking but firm as she told them to stop. And just like that, a spark had turned into a flame. Elena realized then that her fight had never been just about defending herself. It had been about giving others the courage to defend themselves too. Her pain had become power, her silence had become a voice, and that voice echoed through the halls of Riverside High long after the bruises healed. She had come as the quiet new girl, but she stayed as the one who changed everything.